Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, that is right, my friends. Conservative, not bitter indeed. I appreciate you tuning in to this episode. It's going to be a little bit different than a lot of episodes. In fact, today's episode, we're going to talk about some first principles. We're going to talk about some core ideas that feed into this political discourse, to conservatism in general. And I want to talk about those things because they matter. You know, people have opinions on political issues, which is fine. But those beliefs, those ideas should be rooted in virtues, in values, in principles, not simply deciding what you believe because it might impact your political side of the aisle in a good way or a bad way. It's not like being a fan of the Yankees or the Red Sox. These are principled understandings. These are ideas and principles that matter truly, and it actually helps us have a very thorough understanding of politics. It gives us a lens through which we can view what's happening in the political landscape here in this country and even around the world, or regionally, or wherever you pay attention. And I know that there's different types of people in this audience. I have a tremendous respect for the people in this audience, for you, because I know that you are educated. I know that you are informed. I know that you pay attention to these issues. I know that you think about these things. This is quite obvious. We get this, from the research and the understanding of who the conservative talk radio listener is, who the conservative podcast audience, the people in the audience are. And you pay attention to the issues. You understand these things. But the thing is, we're all at different levels, right? Some people have been following these things for decades. Some people are new. And you're on the path. If you're listening to this program, you are on the right path, my friend. You're learning, you're developing your ideology, your beliefs. You're understanding the lens through which you want to view politics and culture and so forth, the world. And but we're at different places, right? Some people are relatively new simply because oftentimes they're younger. Maybe they didn't pay attention. Maybe some of you didn't pay attention during your adult year, when you were raising a family. Maybe you didn't pay attention in high school or college. We all get to where we are in different through different routes and so forth, and that's okay. But I want to talk about these first principles because they matter. Today we're going to talk specifically about conservatism, which is great because every day I'll talk here on this program about conservative, not bitter, right? That's the brand of this program, and it's important that we understand what I mean anyway when I use the word conservative on this radio show and podcast. So that's what we're going to do today, and that's the direction we're headed. You're going to find that we'll do some more of these. I think that this is critically important, especially as we're reaching more people. I want to give people the basics. I want them to understand what the political worldview is, why it matters. I think it's important to talk about what we stand for, not just fight about the issue of the day. Of course, the fight of the day matters, but if we don't have principles through which we're viewing those battles and fights and so forth, we'll often be confused or, could be led to the wrong conclusion. And I want to prevent that from happening, my friends. So that's what we're going to do here today. And you'll find more episodes like this that we'll do here over the next several months or so. So that being said, my friends, living with discomfort, is tough. And prescription medications, while they can help, they often come with a long list of side effects, not to mention the risk of dependency. That's why people are exploring natural options like Kratom from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. This is a family-run company They do things the right way. They work directly with Indonesian farmers. They lab test every batch to make sure that it is clean. There are no synthetics. There are no chemicals. There are no surprises. Just natural, honest kratom that's been used for generations. Real kratom is tested. It's properly handled. The problems that you hear come from the synthetic blends, the contaminated junk, and the shady sellers that are out there. Christopher's, on the other hand, keeps it real. They keep it clean. They keep you informed. You can start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Coupon code Todd Huff will save you 10% on your first purchase. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com is the website. Again, Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency, my friend. So let's start here today. What is conservatism? What does that mean? How would you define the word? Because a lot of people think that they understand. Now, I know that you understand, or you have a series of ideas about what that means, maybe specifically to you, even on an issue-by-issue level. But a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people think that conservatism just means resistance to change. This reminds me, as I say these words, I went to Butler University. I've shared that on this program before. And one of the required courses that we had to take was called Change and Tradition. C&T is what we used to call it. And we would study cultures historically from around the world, cultures that our professors thought, or that the people who wrote the books thought represented change, and then cultures that represented tradition. And it was interesting for sure. But conservatism doesn't mean opposing change. That's what the left wants you to think. That's why they've adopted this term and tried to brand it into our brains, that they are progressive, that they are wanting things to get better, and that better means that things change. The problem is once you've identified a truth, once you've identified the best way of doing something, if you change, by definition, it is going to get worse, right? So I like to think about it like this, and I think I've used this analogy before. If you could somehow make your way to the true magnetic North Pole here on planet Earth, if you're perfectly situated on the North Pole, whatever step you take from that particular point, that first step, it's mind-boggling in a sense, is going to be south, right? So if you're on the North Pole and someone says go south, it's a little bit hard to make sense of that once you go a very far distance. But that first step is going to be south, no matter which direction you take. And in a similar way, just like you are, when we discover a truth, when something is revealed to us, something about human nature, something about free markets, something about a type of government that is better than the rest, it doesn't mean that we cease trying to make it better. In fact, that's why the founders put the words in order to make a more perfect union in the Constitution, because, my friends, because they knew we were never going to get it perfectly right, but we had some really good ideas that we should use as our magnetic north, if you will, for the analogy. We should have a true north, that direction pinpointed. And so there are things that America has gotten right on some very, very key and fundamental things. And if you change from those things, whatever step you take is going to, by definition, if you've found the best way of doing it, whatever step, whatever change you then take is going to be a step in the wrong direction, because you're doing it the best way possible, the best way conceivable. Again, it doesn't mean you can't tweak things and make things better. That's not what I'm saying. And we certainly don't have everything figured out, but we have some very, very important things figured out. And so we don't want to prevent ourselves. We don't want to move and change just for the sake of changing. And as I've shared before, I won't belabor this point, but I often, when we're talking about this very thing, I bring up the Obama campaign from 2008, Hope and Change, right? This was a very effective campaign. It resonated with a lot of people. People were passing out, listening to him speak and so forth. And a lot of people A lot of people one of the reasons it was effective was because it wasn't defined necessarily what we're hoping in and what the change was. And so it really spoke to people's unspecified hopes, dreams, and desires because he represented that to a lot of people. Not to me, of course, and not to most of you because we could see through the charade and the shenanigans, but it resonated with a lot of people. People who thought that he was going to come in and use the government to fix their lives or whatever that they specifically thought. But we're not resistant to change as conservatives. We just we want to change the things that need to be changed. And you don't change principles just because there's a new ideology, a new terminology that's used in colleges or in the media or entertainment or whatever. There are tried and true things that once you establish those or once you determine those, we don't establish the truth. We simply either have it revealed to us or we discover it or whatever. But once you discover that, once it's revealed to you, it's best that you implement it and not deviate from it. Some people think it means protecting the rich. That's not what that means as well. In fact, a lot of our founding fathers, they suffered great loss, right? When they signed that declaration, they said, we mutually pledge to one another our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And that was not just lip service, right? This was something that there was great cost for our founding fathers. I'm not here to say that people in the establishment or in government are not trying to protect certain people, their own wealth, the ruling class and so forth. I think that that's certainly the case can be made for that. But the ideology itself is nothing to do with any of those things. Some people think that it means just voting Republican. In today's world, I would say that that's the case. Now, I don't want to say universally, because there's some people who are libertarian, who are independents, who I could find myself voting for. I find myself choosing the Republican, though, in almost every instance. I did vote for a libertarian governor in Indiana several years ago, but I typically vote for the Republican because the Republican Party, imperfect though it is, and it's got a lot of problems. I don't consider myself a Republican. I do, however, think that the Republican Party is the best political vehicle to advance the conservative political philosophy that exists today. And so I will help Republicans. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as helping Americans by helping communicate ideas and electing people who are best positioned. It's not always ideally positioned. In fact, some of these folks are barely better than their Democrat counterparts in some instances. In many instances, they're dramatically better. And it's dramatically better to have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, a Republican White House than it is to have a Democrat, any of those things. But that doesn't mean that all Republicans, that's not a carte blanche approval of all Republicans, because that's not the case. You can be a conservative and be an independent. You can be a conservative. There was a time, potentially, I could say you could be a Democrat. I don't think so at all. Libertarian, I would say sure. But independent, libertarian, Republican is typically where I think politically we should land. Although I certainly understand that there are problems with individual Republicans, and I'm not here to say that you have to be a Republican. But if we want to win elections, I think that that's the best vehicle by which that we can do that. So conservatism isn't just about politics. It's a broader philosophy about human nature, liberty, the role of government, and I want to go through that. So conservatism, what is it? What is it? So conservatism is the belief, I would say, that America's founding principles, America's founding ideals are the only way, ultimately, to preserve the freedom and liberty that we have and the continued prosperity that we have. Now, it's more than that. It's more than that. But that, at its core, is what it is that conservatism, I would say, is aligned with how this country was founded. It was founded upon individual liberty. This idea of liberty means that you are responsible for you, not in some sort of kind of selfish way. Self-interest is a good thing. Selfishness is not a good thing. Self-interest means, listen, we are all wired to look out for ourselves, our families, our businesses, our community. That's the way that it should be. If you are elected president of the United States, it's bizarre to me that people find the phrase America First so offensive. America First is exactly what you want from your president, from your member of Congress, from the Senate. This is what you want them to believe. It doesn't mean America only. It doesn't mean that we're there to pillage and destroy other people. It means that we focus on our needs first because we're the ones responsible for them. This, to me, is beyond common sense. And so liberty, the idea that liberty comes not from our government, not from other men, but instead from our Creator. This is very, very important. This is fundamentally important. The founders, by the way, if you want to understand our founding documents, you have to understand them as kind of a pair. The Declaration of Independence was written to the British to say to the king to say, look, we are breaking up with you. We're not part of your country anymore, your kingdom. You have violated us in these ways. And it's a list of grievances of the ways that the government had oppressed the people, acted tyrannical over the people. And so, as a result, we're going to declare ourselves free and independent. And, and now we celebrated 250 years of freedom here in this country. The Constitution came after the country was founded. And by the way, so after the country fought the Revolutionary War, after the country was already organized under the Articles of Confederation, it wasn't until later that the Constitution came along, and its purpose was to say, look, we want to basically prevent a redo of the things that we were dealing with under British rule. We want to prevent the tyranny. We're very aware of what that looks like, how that happens. We want to prevent that from happening again. And so we're going to create a document that tells our government, notice this, by the way, the citizens give their consent to the government to do certain things. And in case there's any confusion about what the government should be doing, you should look in said Constitution, and it specifically tells you in the articles what the government is supposed to be doing. And by the way, the 10th Amendment, I'm being very just conversational here, very just generally speaking, the 10th Amendment says if it's not in the Constitution, if something is not specifically delegated to the federal government, it's not the federal government's business. Those things are reserved to the people, individual citizens of this country, and to the states. The government has no business doing it unless the people explicitly give it the authority to do so, because it's dangerous. And that leads to the next important point of conservatism, which is the idea of a limited government. Now, you've heard me talk about on this program before that the correct political continuum, if you will, is to see anarchy on the extreme right end of the political spectrum and to see totalitarian governments on the far left end. So on the right end of the continuum of the spectrum, you have basically the Wild West. There's no governing authority. There's no securing of rights. It's basically everybody for himself. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have a series of governments that are basically telling you that they're going to take care of everything. They're going to provide your every need. This is where Marx comes in, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. These are governments that say, look, we know better than you. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. We'll tell you what you can do. It's the opposite, really, of what we have here. Governments on the left tell the people what the people can do. Governments on the right, at least in our part of the right, where our Constitution, our federal government ended up landing, says, listen, the people tell the government what it can do. And by the way, this is the first time that people could really say that they're citizens. They're not subjects to someone else. They are actual citizens. And so that's what happened. That's how we were framed. And so the founder said, look, we can't have pure anarchy. We know that that's foolishness. You got to have the government's primary role is to secure the rights of the people and to protect them. That's the primary rule. Now, the government can't save you from everything, but it can protect you from a foreign army and that sort of thing. And so that's the basic role of government. We want a government that is big enough to do what we've told it that it can do, but we don't want it to be any bigger. We want it to be limited. So that's why that matters. It also understands our conservative principles and values, understand that we have rights that are given to us by God. I alluded to this earlier. Listen, this is not a popular idea today. There are people all over the place, more and more, who are openly challenging this. This, by the way, is in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that they're given these things by their Creator. These are not given to them by government. Government exists to secure the rights of the individuals, to secure the liberties. They don't create them. They're already innately given to citizens, to human beings by God himself. It's the jobs of government to secure those, to recognize those, and to protect the people, to provide some sort of system of law and order in a society, but to let people to remain as free as possible. And these rights come from God. They cannot come from anywhere else, my friends. It's not the way that it works. If it comes from someone else, we cannot call it a right. A right is something that exists outside of what someone else tells you that you can do. A right exists because God tells you that you have it. He's created you with it. So, I'm looking here at the clock. Probably should stop here and take a quick little breather. That's what I'm gonna do here really quickly, my friends. Are you tired, by the way, of spending your hard-earned money at businesses that turn around and support leftist candidates, leftist causes, ideas that are the absolutely antithetical to what I'm talking about here on the program today? Well, my friends, that's exactly why we created here at the Todd Huff Show Freedom Marketplace. Freedom Marketplace is a free, searchable directory of businesses that share your conservative values. These are businesses that have made a pledge to not support leftist candidates or leftist causes. There's no login required, though you certainly can create an account there if you wish. There are no strings attached. This is just good, patriotic businesses that are pushing in the same direction that you are. Check it out today. It's freedommarketplace.net. Again, that's freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all. We'll continue this, my friends, on the other side of the break. I've got to take a quick time out here. Got to get a quick timeout in. We'll go through some other principles, continue our conversation about conservatism. Again, we'll do that on the other side of the break. In the meantime, you are listening to the home of conservative, not bitter talk. I am your host, the one and only benevolent dictator here behind the microphone, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Going through some core principles today. A little bit different, although we certainly get into these things, but instead of using the day's events and the day's news to springboard into these discussions, we are beginning and just talking about these first principles. We're talking specifically about conservatism, what it is. We went through a couple of things in the first segment. If you missed it, I encourage you to take a listen to that. By the way, I should also tell you, if you want the written background to this show, if you want additional content, and so forth, we send out an inner circle email. It is free each and every day. It goes out about 5 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up for that simply by texting the word JOIN, J-O-I-N, to 317-785-1030. Again, text JOIN to 317-785-1030. All right, let's go through these. So in addition to individual liberty, in addition to limited government, in addition to believing that our rights come from our Creator and not from our government or not from another human being or a man or whatever, we also believe in the idea of personal responsibility. I like to say, well, I don't like to say it, but I think it's true. On the left, they teach people, because listen, there's so much wrong with the left today. The amount of effort that they take and put in to the idea that they're trying to destroy these foundations upon which this country was built. They want to see something altogether different in America today. They don't like this country as founded. Make no mistake about this. And so they try to tear it apart. And there's lots of ways. I can't get into that today. That's not the point of the show. But there are lots of ways that they try to tear down some of our society. And they start by attacking things that are societally acceptable. Things like the nuclear family. Things like traditional femininity versus feminist movements. Things like the relationships between parents and children. They want to break these things apart. They want to break apart the idea that there's a God, that there's absolute moral standards, because once you break down these things, the idea, conservatism is kind of the culmination of a series of building blocks, both idea-wise, but also fundamentally how I would say God created Earth, life to function on planet Earth, right? You have the individual, you have married couples, you have families, you have extended families, you have small communities and churches and all those sorts of things. And conservatism is built to function with respect for those other institutions. Liberalism, or should I say the ideology of the radical left, says, to heck with all that stuff. The government's going to be the end all. The government's going to solve all your problems. The government is going to protect your families. And certainly I said at the beginning that it's the job of government to protect people, but I don't mean protect them from every single potential problem on planet Earth. I mean protect the people from foreign and domestic enemies, right? I mean protecting people in that sense, securing our border when there's drugs and human trafficking and people coming across that border that aren't supposed to be doing that, those sorts of things. But anyway, the left doesn't believe those things. And the left also believes that we're all collectively responsible for everything, but none of us, unless you're a white conservative Christian entrepreneur or some such thing, or even a white conservative female, you're not responsible for anything individually, but we're all collectively responsible. This is a powerful notion in the minds of the left. It's a tool that's used to pressure and manipulate people. Global warming, climate change finds itself here. How dare you, for example, the thinking is, how dare you drive a big gas-guzzling SUV? Don't you know that we're all in this together? COVID was the same way. Put your mask on, shut up. Aren't you here to protect, slow the spread? Aren't you here to maintain social distancing? What are you, some sort of a rogue independent thinker who doesn't follow the rules that have been dictated by Dr. Fauci? Even as I say those words, I'm reminded of some of those people singing songs to Dr. Fauci. Dr. Fauci, cure this disease, right? It's just begging for the vaccine. Anyway, I don't want to go down those rabbit holes. I could, because there's a lot to take in. But conservatism says you're responsible first and foremost for yourself. You're responsible for your family, your children, right? You're responsible for the people, again, building out from those building blocks, the family, the individual, the family. Those are the things that you're responsible for. You're not responsible for some abstract idea, the sea levels in Guam or some such thing. It's remarkable to me how they've been so effective at doing this, right? Whenever it's the same reason you get a bunch of people apologizing at corporate meetings for being white or whatever. It's crazy talk to me. Just because somebody was a certain race or a certain religion, it doesn't mean that I'm guilty of the things that they might have done in the past, even if I share their race or share their gender, share their religion, whatever. This is wild, wild stuff, but the left tells you that everyone's collectively responsible for the actions of every individual, but no one is somehow responsible for himself. There's always someone else to blame. It is completely backwards. It's degenerate, to be quite candid. Conservatism believes in the rule of law. We don't have kings. We're not subject to individuals. We're not here to pay loyalties. Of course, we should respect people. I mean, the Bible gives us clear instruction on how to respect people who have been placed in positions of political authority and so forth. But we're not subjected to them. They're not superior to us. That's not the way that this works. We should, however, be loyal to the rule of law. That matters tremendously. The left is constantly, look at these fights we have. The left is constantly out there excusing people breaking the law. You have people who literally are breaking, say, immigration law, but they're excused. And people on the left criticize, malign, attack people who say they want the law to be enforced. Why don't they change the law? The law is what the law is. The law says if you're here illegally, you can and shall be deported. If you've overstayed your visa, if you're not supposed to be here, then you can and shall be deported. This isn't complicated stuff. So they want to, again, it muddies the water about everything. It turns basic logic and common sense, radical leftism does, turns those things on its head. We believe in free markets. That's a big thing as well. You ought to be able to enter into agreements, contracts. You ought to be able to do business with people and businesses who can solve your problems. It's up to you and them. And the fair price is what you guys agree to, right? This idea, candidly, I understand where people who say price gouging, where they're coming from, but I also understand that free markets, if you want to do business, you have to find a price that works for both the buyer and the seller. Otherwise, there will be no economic activity. And by the way, what it's worth to one person might be different than what it's worth to another person. But free markets matter tremendously. People ought to be able to exchange in voluntary, or engage, I should say, in voluntary contracts and have these ideas or have these solutions, give them the ability to solve their own problems, however they see fit. Of course, we talked about the Constitution earlier. We believe in a constitutional government. The Constitution is the framework for the government. If it's not written there, then candidly, it shouldn't be something the government is doing. We also believe in equality under or before the law. We don't believe in equity. Equity is when people say outcomes should be equal. And then you've got all these bureaucrats trying to make sure, well, this person is a little bit faster, so let's put a little bit more weight in his metaphorical backpack. And you've got these judges making these decisions when in reality, what we should have is a country that says, look, we're going to help you remain as free as possible. We're going to have as much freedom in the marketplace as we can. And we're going to give everyone equal access to this under the law. We're not going to prop people up. We're not going to pull people back. We're going to basically make sure that the law is being followed, apply it consistently, no matter who the person is on each side of a legal contest or whatever. That's what we're going to do. Those are key principles to constitutional conservatism. I wish I had more time to continue talking about this, but I'm up against a break again. My friends. Let's be honest, though, when your financial world starts getting a little bit more complicated, you need more than one-size-fits-all advice. That's where Full Suite Wealth shines the brightest. Their team specializes in working with families and individuals at your level. They offer personalized guidance that goes well beyond the basics, my friends. For private equity and private credit to options, strategies, and coordinated legal planning, Full Suite Wealth helps you see the big picture and make confident decisions about your legacy. It's all about having a dedicated team there to guide you each and every step of the way so that you can focus on what matters most to you, your family, your goals, your future, the things we've been talking about here in today's program. So if you want real confidence in your financial life, head on over to fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. Time out here for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment of the program today. I love doing programs like this, by the way, talking about first principles and ideas that matter to you, that matter to me, that matter for the future direction of this country. I know you care about this country too, right? I know that you do. But you cannot fight for America, my friends, if you're not taking care of yourself. That's why I'm here to tell you about Solti. It's an all-natural, clinically proven, science has spoken on this, clinically proven way that lowers cholesterol safely. There are no prescriptions. There are no doctor visits. All you have to do is take 2 Solti soft gels a day. And by the way, this is not a drug. It is a supplement And it's worked for people. It may be able to work for you as well, my friends. We need healthy, strong Americans fighting for this nation. Can't let high cholesterol keep you down. So text the word health. If you want to text the word heart. I said health. That's not right. Text the word heart to 317-785-1030, and we'll send you the link on how you can get this product, save 50%, and get free shipping to boot. Again, text the word HEART, H-E-A-R-T. Again, that number 317-785-1030. We'll get you the link on how you can get the product. All right. So I said earlier, a lot more that I want to get into. I just don't have the time here. But I said a couple of days ago, and I stand by this. Friends, we are better off. I hear people say, let me say it this way. I hear people say they criticize the 1%, right? The 1% millionaires and billionaires, and there's this class warfare and this anxiety and hatred and angst and tension between these groups. It's an insult to be in the 1%, I guess. But friends, let me say this, and I say this respectfully. I'm not speaking to what you're going through personally. You may be dealing with a health problem. You may be dealing with a relationship problem, divorce. You may be dealing with bankruptcy, financial problems, any number of things. I don't know. Those things, by the way, those problems transcend all types of governments and all societies. Those problems exist because of the fall. And I'm sorry if you're going through it. This is not meant to address that. But I want to tell you, if you live in the United States of America today, like me, we're in the 1%. We are in truly the 1% of all people who have ever walked this planet. That doesn't mean life is perfect. That doesn't mean that there are no struggles. That certainly doesn't mean America doesn't have problems. But when you think about life expectancy, I've read estimates that it's believed that there's been 100 billion to 120 billion people in the world. There's 340-ish million people living in America today. We have it better than the vast, vast, vast majority. Again, don't ignore what I said earlier, because your circumstances may not be consistent with what I'm saying because of personal struggles and difficulties. But what I am saying is that based upon things like life expectancy, quality of life, freedom, lack of some things like, wars happening here in our backyard, or famine or disease. Certainly people can get sick, but I'm saying there aren't major problems consistently that we are having to deal with and navigate here in the United States of America today. That's the grace and gift of God, my friends. But we possess extraordinary blessings that much of human history, technological advances, having a hospital, having air conditioning, having running water. I remember listening to my grandma, who I'm still fortunate. My grandma, she'll be 90 here at the end of this year. But listening to her tell stories, I was just sharing one with the kids about her telling a story about an old outhouse when they were younger, her and my grandfather. And it's just, we're blessed. We're blessed today. We can accept that it's not perfect here, but it's not perfect anywhere. But it is good here, my friends. And we should be grateful for this. I'd like to tell you, conservatism, listen, I've got a minute or so here left. Why does conservatism matter? Well, number one, it preserves liberty. Liberty is how all of us were created to live. We were all created to be free. That's how God made us. God, listen, from a perspective of our relationship with our Creator, He gave us choice. Think about this. He didn't make us robots. He tells us what He expects of us. He tells us what is good and acceptable, what is sinful. He's made this clear. But He made us free. He gave us choice. He gave us choice. We are free beings. That matters a lot. He's given us liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, the Bible says, there is liberty. We need to maintain our constitutional government. We shouldn't just have people in our Congresses, in our presidential offices, the White House. We shouldn't have people in the Supreme Court who are just making up things as they go. It matters. This framework matters for the preservation of liberty and for the overall health of this great republic. But it matters personally for our own lives as well. When you think about the responsibilities we have and why that matters, it's ultimately the only way any person's going to get anywhere is to look in the mirror and say, listen, I have to do certain things, right? I also, there's some things that are out of my control, but by the grace of God. But these things are at risk of being taken away from us if we deviate. America is great because it adhered to ideas that were good and that made it great. If we deviate from those, eventually our greatness will leave us. And I've got to go. SDJ.